We're in the people business. Software is just the delivery mechanism. And I think veterinarians are in the people business too. And I say this often, it doesn't matter what business you're in. If you're going to be successful, you're in the people business.
I think one of the things about equine practice is that they fail to focus on building a team that functions well together, that brings joy to all of the workers every day. So many of these teams are so focused on the job at hand that they fail to develop the interpersonal relationships and the fun throughout the day. I think that's a value takeaway as far as being a team.
Welcome to the Unstall Your Practice digital radio experience for equine veterinary practices and their teams. I'm Cynthia Bain, practice growth specialist for business infusion software, expert in equine practice solutions. I'm literally married to the profession and share the purpose of overcoming obstacles to practice growth and making the equine veterinary profession a profitable, sustainable, and fun experience for you. Join me and my guest as we tackle your toughest challenges head on and learn about better, more effective ways to get the job done and get you on your way to unbridled growth and a winner's circle future. So saddle up because those future wins start right here, right now.
Welcome to another episode of Unstall Your Practice. I'm Cynthia Bain, your host. We are just coming off of a great episode where we had Dr. Fairfield Bain with us, my husband, and just when I think I have heard all of his stories at least a dozen times, he surprises me with another one. I've heard how much you enjoyed his stories, so we will definitely have him back on. But today, I have the pleasure of chatting with someone I have worked with in one capacity or another for almost 16 years. And I'm just realizing that as I say it out loud. That is mind-blowing to me because it seems like just yesterday. For the past couple of years, I have worked to support his efforts in marketing. I find him to be one of the most forward-thinking individuals that I know. Much like me, he came into the equine veterinary industry not having a veterinary background, but rather a business background with a passion for problem solving and developing solutions. My guest today is a business and technology executive who specializes in strategies, harmonizing people, processes, and technologies with a focus on sustainable revenue models and profitable growth. He has spent 24 years in technology commercialization, new company formation, and strategic growth development. He is a mentor and a coach to early-stage CEOs and has worked with over 200 companies to formulate go-to-market strategies and has facilitated a CEO roundtable group for 10 years. He has also worked as an entrepreneur in residence for 5 technology incubators as well as national companies. He is president and CEO of Business Infusions, an equine veterinary practice management software development and sales company that delivers software globally. He led the company from first customer to the leading provider of equine software globally and has led 4 company acquisitions, a cross-border merger, and sale to private equity. He holds a BSc in computer science and has many accreditations and certifications to his name, including Roy Group training from MIT. So with all of that being said, I thought it just made perfect sense to bring him to the show where we could spend some time with him here today and hear it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So please welcome to Unstall Your Practice, Scott Pickard. Scott, welcome.
Well, thanks for that welcome, and very excited to be here as well as we kick off this podcast. So,
Scott, I have had the pleasure of not only knowing you, but working with you in some capacity. But I've never been as enthralled and as excited to hear your story as the night that Fairfield and I shared a meal with you here in Albuquerque. I would love for you to share your story, how you got into this business, and where you began.
This whole story starts back in 2006. And it was really through a connection that I had in some previous software startups that we were engaged with, and got a call from our lead developer, who is still with our company today after going on 18 years. There was a practice management software, now known in the marketplace as HVMS, that they were just bringing to market. And I got a call to see if there was something I could do to help them to really look at how they could take the software that was being built inside one of the largest equine practices in Canada and take that to the further market. And so we were fortunate to work with Jason, again, the lead developer, and Dr. Greg Andrews and Dr. John Grindy in really kind of bringing their mission forward. And the whole software concept was built inside of their hospital, trying to solve some very specific problems for the equine vet around billing and misbilling specifically, inventory management, which is one of the huge cost of goods in a practice, and then veterinary compensation, and really looking at different strategies of how they could maximize profitability while really focusing on the medical records and inventory aspect of practice. So they had spent a few years building that practice or building the software inside of More Equine. And after several years and really getting some significant insight from other veterinarians, other hospital staff, finance people, outside veterinarians, they launched the product in 2006. And the first customer outside of More Equine was in Fairfield, Connecticut. And so we kind of started from this foundation of really solving problems from veterinarians. And if we fast forward, the first couple years, we were really fortunate to have some buy-in from other equine vets that had the same problems as More Equine did. And they were instrumental in helping us really build this model out and build the software out. So we had people on site for months at a time, working with their practice, working with their staff, being out in the field, being in the barns, and really building out the software that was going to help them to run their businesses more efficiently. And then after those first couple of years, it really started to take off. And so at this point in time, we run a lot of the large practices in North America, the UK, the Middle East, Australia, and other parts of the world too. And we've really tried to focus on delivering what our customers are looking for, to reduce pinch points in workflow, make sure that we look after that high cost inventory items, and make sure that we're trying to capture medical records, but really focused on the billing side of things at the same time to save them some time. So there's a quick history of kind of how we've got to where we're at with our main product. And then we've got some other offshoots and other things that we're doing as a result of the marketplace feedback that we've got so far.
I'm amazed at all that you've done. What about you personally? Did you have a veterinary background, a software background?
I did not. And it was one of the things that the initial founders and two veterinarians thought would be a different perspective, bringing me into the mix. And so what they were looking for is someone who could have a different perspective than that they were used to, and really kind of look at the business side of it from a non-veterinary piece to bring together messaging, value propositions, and then the strategies that we needed to go to market, because I had done a number of software companies before. And so there was a great mix and a great collaboration with the people that were involved to really help us to build out the right model, which is in software is important from a sustainability perspective, really to deliver the right products to customers and veterinarians in all the different markets that we serve. So it was an interesting experiment that worked out fairly well, I think, for everybody. And it's an engaging and very interesting market, and especially with the things that have changed in the corporate companies coming in, private equity groups coming in. We're now in a different phase of things, but I think it served everyone well, getting different perspectives and having just a phenomenal team to be able to help us to bring products and services to market after this many years.
So you are a business guy, and I'm just so eager to ask you, you've been in this industry now a long time. You came into it from a non-veterinary background, but because of your years of experience, you have seen change and growth in an ever-changing industry. So what would you say is the biggest change from the time you entered into the industry to today?
Wholeheartedly, the biggest change has been in the last 5 years with the practice roll-ups and corporatization. And that's changed so many things, from the owner veterinarians running practices and being in charge of not just the veterinary side of it, but the business side of it, and building culture and building teams within practices. And now it's largely led from the corporate side by the requirement for ongoing financial growth. And the service to the clients has always been paramount. And I think that shifted a little bit with some of the corporate stuff that's come into place. And I don't necessarily think that's the best thing that's happened. And I think now that as you get a lot of practices that are shifting from owner-operators, veterinarians who may have been in the practice for 15, 20, 30, 40 years that are now moving out and retiring just because of age demographics. It's now shifting and changing what some of the priorities are for some practices. I'm not saying that's for everyone. I think the true path and the passion for many of the equine vets is still dealing with the customers and the horses, but it's created this new dynamic now of making sure that businesses are more profitable and continue to grow profitably, whereas before that wasn't as big a focus as it currently is right now. So to me, that's probably one of the biggest changes that we've seen in the nearly 20 years we've had working with the practices now.
So I was just going to interject that in our first episode, I discussed that I had just binge watched the entire 8 seasons of House. And one of the things that I love about that show is that it was based on Sherlock Holmes, not actually a medical doctor. And it was about solving problems. And I see that in you, Scott. You solve problems every day. And you've outlined numerous problems and challenges in specifically the equine veterinary industry. Is there one challenge that you think is the greatest challenge that equine veterinarians are facing right now? What would that be?
My perspective on this is trying to get enough new veterinarians coming into the equine space. The job that the equine vets do is very demanding. There's a wide swath of things that they're responsible and accountable for, knowledge base they have to have. They work a crazy amount of hours and they have a lot of pressures on their time, both business and personal side of it. And if you look at some of the AVMA stats that have come out recently in one of their surveys, is the number of equine vets has dropped quite considerably. There's lots of reasons for that. And so I think one of the big challenges now is how do you keep younger vets engaged? How do you bring new students into the equine market to make sure that the practice of vet med in the equine side stays flourishing to treat all the different range and breeds and brands of horses that are out there right now. So having that shortage of vets, it really affects not only the veterinarian, but the technicians that are working with them, the office staff that are available to work with them. And there's just so many demands on those vets right now, and collectively their teams. It's going to be really interesting to see how that's addressed to make sure future-wise sustainability is going to be something that can be not just achieved, but so this market can grow like it has over the past 15 years and see if it can come back to that stable state that it once was.
So the new veterinarians not entering the equine sector of veterinary medicine, how do we solve that? How do we fix that? How do we bring new equine veterinarians into the space? I
think that's a very challenging question. And I don't have a very good direct response to that one. I think part of it is compensation. With the corporatization, there's been some very interesting and aggressive forms of compensation offered to the companion animal vets that hasn't come across to the equine side. Hopefully it does at some point in time. I think the fact of new generations coming up and new demographics, their work-life priorities are a bit different than maybe they were 15 or 20 years ago. So I think the equine vets have to get really creative, bringing in people to their own practices, because the industry isn't going to solve it. The individual vets have to solve it and look at different compensation strategies, look at different shared calendars, shared working environments with people, and bring more people in that are going to be engaged longer term. It's a big challenge, and the shortage of staff all around is going to be a challenge. But I think, and we see this in some of the practices we work with, the aggressive veterinarians, the out-of-the-box thinkers, the people that are willing to look at different ways of doing it, their practices are doing very, very well, but the status quo just isn't going to work anymore. And I think the individual owners have to get creative in order to make sure that their businesses are going to flourish going forward. And that means a lot of things to younger generations that are moving into the business world now.
So as we look ahead, you have created a wonderful business with Business Infusions, and you're offering solutions. When we discussed this podcast, one of your statements to me that I hold really dear to my heart was you wanted it to provide solutions to veterinarians. And so if that meant bringing in experts from other areas, practice management, medical records, you were all for it. You really wanted to create a service for our industry. What solution is there on the forefront that could be made available to these veterinarians that you think could be most impactful?
One of the reasons that we've been successful at Business Infusions is our team. We're in the people business. The software is just the delivery mechanism. And I think veterinarians are in the people business too. And I say this often, is it doesn't matter what business you're in. If you're going to be successful, you're in the people business. And our team has been phenomenal in building relationships so that when problems happen, not if, but when, because they always do, people like to deal with people. And so if we're hiding behind, screens like we do because of the world we work in, that's only going to get you so far. In the equine space specifically, I think if the vets can really build out dynamic teams that have a lot of different skill sets, and the equine experience really matters because there's a lot of that customer focus and know-how that's required. But if these practitioners can bring in outside financial experts and they can bring in HR people to help them look at different models of how they can build out their practice, I think if they can look outside of what traditional vet med is and look for additional income streams outside of practice, of traditional practice, this is what's going to create some of the sustainability going forward. So I don't think there's one magic bullet, but I think really looking at the business and the vet practice, what could they do as far as enhancement to building out their people resources? What other service offerings could they have? How can it really serve their client base? And I think those are the ones that'll be very successful long term. So to me, it's all about the people and what you can leverage and how you can get them to provide better service for customers. And that could be a whole swath of different services and offerings that are out there. I don't think there's one thing specifically.
Well, I can say that working with you for the numerous years that I have, I can definitely sense that you are a people person, you are a team builder, and you definitely serve. I find that just so fascinating about you. As far as the clients that equine veterinarians are serving, how do you feel that they are being impacted by the changes in the current dynamic of practice?
We've heard from some customers that the corporate groups that own them, they have, daily or weekly revenue requirements they have to hit. They have to hit certain levels of profitability. So that by default means that prices are going to rise. And not just in equine med, but generally the cost of everything has gone up. And so clients are really, I think that they're feeling the pinch on a lot of stuff, not just with dealing with their horses, but in life in general. So I think there's a considerable impact on kind of the pleasure horse, the people that have the horses that are doing it more for pleasure as opposed to the competitive, whether it's rodeo or dressage, whatever the case might be. I think everyone is feeling this. And I think those practices that get really thoughtful about how they can create services or bundles or packages or something more for their clients, those are the ones that are going to see the best client retention over time, because price shopping happens all the time. But great service and building those relationships is what's going to keep people with a particular vet. And I think those are the kind of things that I would really focus on if I was in practice. How can we service them, and what does that mean to them? Like, not just what we think, and we have these conversations all the time internally. What do we think? What do we think? But really, what does the customer think, and what does the customer want? And I think if they can get into that mindset even more than they are, because the vets are very service oriented in almost every regard, it just needs to create a different dynamic and shift in paradigms right now to keep them and their clients really happy and keep that engagement for both parties happening.
This information is so valuable, and I think so many are going to benefit from this. If there was one takeaway, something that equine veterinarians could take away that they could immediately implement in their practice, the most significant change that they could make to make a lasting impact, what would that one thing be?
The biggest thing they could do is talk to their team about what their team is thinking, what their team is hearing from customers and clients, and be very thoughtful over the next months and year as they think about how the practice is going to change and how they can be at the forefront of what their customers and their team are looking for, to make sure that there's less attrition both from customers and from their staff. And I think if that thoughtful foundation is there, they have a better chance of surviving rather than waiting to do something or doing nothing at all.
I love it. If our audience wanted to connect with Business Infusions,
the best way to get in touch with us is through our website at businessinfusions.com. And that has links out to all of our different product offerings that we have, which include small practices, mid-sized to large practices, distributed, whether it's corporate or individual. And we can connect you with some of our folks depending on what you need as well. On there's some forms, there's phone numbers, there's email addresses, and we'd be happy to engage in a conversation and see if there's a good fit with what we have to offer. But most importantly, to solve what problems that you're having in the practice. You can go onto the website, businessinfusions.com. There's forms they can fill out to request that, or there's phone numbers on there they can call, and we'll be happy to set up a demo time that works for their schedules.
Scott, thank you so much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to spend some time here with us today. I appreciate you so much, and I look forward to following you in the industry and seeing all that you're up to.
It's my pleasure, and thank you, Cynthia, for putting this whole thing together. You are a star, and we're so fortunate to have you on the team. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I'm sure you can see now why I was so passionate about having Scott on the show today. He brings so much value to the industry. I love that he came to the veterinary industry from a business background. He brings so much to the table. One of my great takeaways is just that he's such a forward thinker. He's always looking for new ways to improve the veterinary practice to make it easier for veterinarians to do their job. He has such a business mind, and he's always looking for new ways to enhance the veterinary profession. And it kind of goes back to the episode where we had Dr. Bain on the show. You know, we titled it Teaching a New Horse Old Tricks. And I love how Scott brings things from outside the veterinary industry into it to see how it can benefit those that we serve. As we said in his bio, he's always harmonizing people. And I think that's one of his best qualities. As someone who works with him on a daily basis, I love that he gives the people that surround him the freedom to express themselves, to perform their duties and their jobs in a way that benefits everyone. One of his strengths is that he is great at building a team, surrounding himself with great people, empowering them to do their jobs without interference, trusting his people, giving them room to make mistakes and allowing them to grow from them. He is phenomenal at that. And I would encourage any practice owner to reach out to him if they ever needed advice on how to build a team, because he is an expert at doing that. So how can you improve your team? One of the takeaways here today is how we can bond our teams, how we can make our teams more cohesive, how we can make them function better together. And one of the things that is so valuable is empowering them to do so, valuing them, giving them the leeway to excel and also to fail. Scott is about so much more than just software. He's about more than veterinary medicine. He's really about people. He's about teams. And I'm very, very grateful to be on his team. So I would just say, think about your team. Think about what they could bring to the table if you empower them to do so. And we all have teams, right? We don't do it alone. It's cliche to say there's no I in team, but it's so very true. And Scott is the epitome of that saying. So today we heard it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, that team building is the backbone to every business, every industry. So I'm just so grateful that Scott shared that with us here today. Scott is a leader in the veterinary software industry. He's passionate about providing solutions to equine veterinarians, streamlining your practice, making your workflow more efficient. And he is an expert at that. So if you are in need of that service, please reach out to Business Infusions and see what they may have to offer to you. They serve everyone from the solo practitioner all the way to the multi-location practice. This podcast is no exception to Scott empowering and giving me the freedom to create. When I brought this idea to him, he was completely on board, and we're just 4 episodes in. This will be our 4th. And the response has been incredible from all of the listeners. we're providing value across the board to any industry, anyone who's listening. And the goal of this show is to provide value that you can immediately take away. I feel like we've done that here today, and we've done it in previous episodes. I would encourage you to go back and listen specifically to episodes 2 and 3, where we had Deb Reeder and Dr. Fairfield Bain. We have no shortage of guests. We have some amazing people coming to you. So please tune in for future episodes, because we're going to bring you more of what we're bringing to you here today. That concludes today's episode, but certainly not this podcast. So until next time, I'm Cynthia Bain. And on behalf of myself, my producer Frank, our guest Scott Pickard, and the entire Business Infusions team, I thank you so very much for being here. And I'll see you again for another insightful episode of Unstall Your Practice.
The Unstall Your Practice digital radio podcast is a broadcast wellness production powered by Business Infusion Software. Copyright 2024. All rights reserved. Executive producer Frank Sardella. For more information, visit businessinfusions.com.
No! So what do you want me to say? Sorry.